Today, I'm excited to be joined by accountant, profit and tax expert, Julie Robinson. Julie is the director of an accountancy practice called Footprints Accountancy that specialise in helping trades and construction business owners to understand their numbers, increase their net profits, but without overpaying on taxes. Julie is now working with lots and lots of our Growth Club and Inner Circle members so they can understand the numbers in the business and achieve financial freedom for themselves and their families. Julie, welcome to the show.
Hi Craig, thank you for inviting me on the podcast. I'm really looking forward to this.
And thank you for joining me, Julie, because I know that you've got stacks of knowledge that you're going to be sharing that's incredibly valuable. Now, Julie, before we get started, do you just want to introduce yourself and your business?
Yeah, I'm Julie Robinson. I'm a qualified accountant. I'm SEMA qualified. And the reason why I explain that is that I am qualified to do the tax and the accounts and what I call the normal stuff. But I'm very much coming from a business perspective. I'm fascinated by your net profit figure, whatever that figure might well be, because that hasn't just happened. That's a result of hundreds, sometimes thousands of decisions you've made throughout that year. So it's a result of how you're managing your business.
Yeah. Now, Julie, in the lead up to this episode today, I did a little bit of research. And statistically, the construction sector is consistently recording the highest number of insolvencies in the UK. In other words, as we know, businesses failing and businesses going bust. In actual fact, last year alone, 4,000 construction firms went insolvent and went to the wall. And in actual fact, last month alone, 445 trades and construction businesses went pop. That's 17%, the highest percentage of any industry, any sector on the planet is trades and construction. So why is this happening?
Margins are getting tighter, material costs are going up, project delays. Everyone always gets hit by project delays. It always takes longer than we thought. Cash flow problems from not managing the business properly, not chasing the money, and not being profitable in the first instance.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then why is it that clearly trades or construction business owners that are running a business that's there to provide them and the family with the lifestyle that they deserve, why is it that they take no time or they avoid looking and understanding the numbers in the business?
Yeah, I think the main thing is we're not taught this. So if you're training to be a plumber, electrician, whatever you may well be, then you're taught that trade. You're not taught the numbers. You're not taught the necessity to do it. You're also very, very busy. So therefore, if you've not got the time, and I think you also bury their heads in the sand sometimes when they know money's tight, they know they're working hard, they're not sure why, and they just keep on going. If they keep on going and they're getting it wrong, then that just explodes, doesn't it? It becomes more and more of it. But I think we start with the education and understanding the need and what knowing and being on the numbers, what difference that can make.
Yeah. Do you know what? Looking back, it's all right me saying this, but looking back when I first set up my joinery business back in 1994, in all honesty, I hated maths. I weren't even clever at school, so I had no education into numbers. I don't think in today's society that schools, if you like, do enough to educate people on the real world. So I just presume when I first set up my business that the more I worked, the more jobs I had on, the more vans I had on the road, the more staff I had, the more profit that I'd make. And that's not how it works. And I learned the hard way. So I've been on that side of it. So what would you say are some of the most common mistakes that you see, having working with hundreds, if not thousands of trades businesses? What is it that you see and the mistakes that they're making? What are they?
Pricing the job. So they don't know the hourly rate, the day rate, whatever they're working on. And when they When they, let's say that they're doing a job for £1,000 today and their material costs are £400, they think they've made £600 today. So very often they'll say, have you had a good day? Yeah, I made 600 quid. Well, you haven't, because you haven't covered all your other costs. So they're very much going on what I call fag packet maths. So they're just scribbling away, we're invoiced this is my cost. Understanding the true costs as well. So when I speak to someone and they say, are they going to take on somebody I'm taking on somebody new, what's that going to cost you then? They'll say, well, they're on minimum wage, so it's not going to cost me very much. A minimum wage member of staff now could cost you £29,000 if you've already used your employment allowance. It's not cheap. So they need to understand their true costs. The big one as well with quoting is the reality of how much time that job's going to take. They never get it right. I don't always get it right. We think something's going to take so long. But they need to do as well what I call a post-mortem, where they're checking, I thought it would take me 3 days. How long did it take? Why? What went wrong? And it might be that something went wrong and it's a one-off. It might be that it didn't go wrong. It's that's the norm, and that they're really having themselves on sometimes how long a job's going to take.
Yeah, and I think when we start looking at this and understanding the numbers, as I'm sure we're going to come on to, pricing the job is the first root problem of them getting into debt or them getting into financial difficulty.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about pricing a job, Julie, can you just give us a few pointers of what people need to know when they're pricing a job, the numbers? Because a lot of people just take labour, materials, throw them together, whack a bit on extra for a bit of a drink, if you like, at end of job, and then keep the fingers crossed and hope and pray that job goes on time. The materials cost the exact same, and they make a few quid at the end of it. But that's not how it works, is it? So how really, what are the numbers that they should use to be able to price a job correctly?
Yeah, so they need to start with the material costs, and that the true cost of the material costs. So what happens sometimes is maybe they quoted 6 months ago and they've been waiting to do this job, and now things have gone up. So if things go up, they need to be able to go back. So the true cost of the material, the true cost of salaries or of staff, subbies, or however you pay them, and that's your tax, national insurance, pension, any insurances you pay for them, the true cost of them. The biggie here is how much time you get out of them. So how many hours a day are actually billable, or are we messing about backwards and forwards to screw fix? Are we driving an hour each way? However your business works, but the true number of hours, the true number of days a year you're getting out of those staff. So we need to work that one out. But then we need to look at the overheads in your business, because the way that they're paid for is from these jobs that you're doing. Yeah, so each job should give you, so when we get down to gross profit, which we'll talk about later, but when we get down to gross profit, that is then giving you a contribution to all your other overheads. And not just your overheads, but your own money, your own salary, dividends, or however you're going to take your money, and the tax. All of that comes out of these jobs that you're doing.
Yeah, and you know, and everybody else knows, we're coaching over 30,000 trades businesses now. I bet I could count on one hand how many businesses I've come across that are actually quoting correctly, including the labour, the materials, a bit of extra on top percentage-wise for wastage perhaps, or increasing prices. They don't understand the overheads. They don't know what their overhead contribution is and how to assign that. They don't know what gross profit is or net profit, which we'll come into. And this is where I believe everybody, and I mean this, everybody needs to improve and understand what those numbers are. All right. So have you got anything else that we can add to that?
I was just going to say, I think that in some ways this is getting worse as well, because let's say they do understand, and I'd say that's a low percentage, but let's say they do understand and they work out the cost, then they're now looking and going, that looks like a lot. So because costs have gone up, materials have gone up, and they're thinking that looks like a lot. And him down the road does it cheaper, and all that conversation that I've heard over and over again. But they're then looking at, well, I can't charge that. So they actually worked it out, and then they're knocking some money off.
Do you
You
know what?
know,
I'm laughing here, Julie, because I reckon everybody's done that, me included, where you put your price together and you think, would I pay that? Does that look a bit steep? And you sat
yeah,
there looking at it on your quote and you go, do you know what? I tell you what I'll do. I'll just knock 500 quid off, and you just pluck a figure out of fresh air and knock it off and go, yeah, I'll put it in at that. But do you know when you get the job, you're like that. Why did I knock 500 quid off? I should have just
yeah.
stuck to my price.
I'm big on why. So everything I want to know why we made. And sometimes I say to someone, "Why have you done that?" And they'll go, "Because of this, this, and this." And I'll go, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." Sometimes I say, "Why have you done that?" And they go, well, I don't know. I don't know. Just did. And so when why have you just knocked 500 quid off? Don't know. Do not understand.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we're establishing here that most trades businesses don't know how to price, which is the first hurdle that they've got to overcome. Because if you get your pricing wrong, you're screwed. And I say to them, what's the point? Listen, what's the point of you doing that job that might take you a week, a month, even 3 months if you're a building contractor, to get to the end of the job and either break even or make a few quid? Because all that time you've just spent, a week, 2 weeks, three months doing a job for a little bit of profit, there's no point. You'd have been better off just staying in bed and using that time to learn how to price jobs correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all need to understand break even, but who wants to break even? What's the point? We'd earn more working at McDonald's, wouldn't we, sometimes? And then the other one that I see over and over again is when their subbies are actually getting more out of this than the business owner. And that's not uncommon.
Yeah. And again, back in the day, I've done it myself, where you're paying your subbies more than you're paying yourself, and paying your materials, paying your labour, paying all your suppliers, you're paying everybody off, and then hoping that you've got enough left in pot at the end of a job to pay yourself. And there were times over years in my early days, back in 90s, where I'd do a loft conversion, right? It'd be a 9-week job. I'd get to end at job and there's no money left for me. And I've gone 9 weeks without any money. And
I think sometimes the bigger the job or the more money that you're quoting, the more money that's coming in, you think you've made it then. And sometimes the bigger you are, the less profit you're making. The number of times people have sat here and said, I want to do 1 million. And I said, where's that figure come from? Well, it's just a figure in my head, I want to do 1 million. I've said, well, we carry on the route that you're going. If you do 1 million, you'll now be losing about 200 grand.
yeah,
So bigger's not always better, but we can be conned ourselves. We can think that we've got that big job and therefore we're hitting the big time now. And it's not always. Sometimes, but not always.
so knowing that we are not doing the numbers correctly and we don't know how to price jobs, which is the root cause of it all, if we fast forward this, what negativity and what happens to a business owner if they're too busy working on the tools? And I get it, because I've been there. You're grafting on tools 8 to 10 hours a day. You've got to come home. You've got to do all your paperwork and your invoicing and your pricing and all that side of it. And you've got to fit your family and hobbies in as well. So we know that it's a tough gig. But what are the negative effects on the financial side of the business in particular? Because you'll see this all the time, I'm sure. People coming to you saying, Julie, I'm in a bit of a pickle. How do you get me out of this shit?
Yeah. So when it's basically cash flow, isn't it? And running out of money. And I know in HMRC is the big one. HMRC are the number one creditor that makes a company go bust. So they force them down an insolvency route. But they tend to be using HMRC's money. So they're spending the VAT money, or they're taking money out themselves as as an income. Let's call it, I'm using the word dividends loosely because you can only take dividends if you've got profit. So taking illegal dividends out of the money. So you're taking your money out that you've not got, and basically where's that money come from? How are you able to do that? Some of them don't understand. They think if the cash is in the bank, then that means that money's there to be taken. But if they're spending the VAT money or they're spending loan money that's gone in to grow the business and they're taking that home, we saw that a lot at COVID, and I understand why at COVID, but that bounce back loan still had to be repaid. But if they're taking their own money out as well and they've not paid HMRC, there's no money left there for the tax, ultimately it's going to run out. The big issue here for me is doing more regular, being on top of the numbers, doing management accounts and actually spotting these before they start to happen.
Yeah. And, thinking again, going back to me and the people that I coach, I think one of the big thing is, let's say they join my inner circle, right? They come onto my inner circle and they're desperate to make more profit. And I said to them, why do you need to make more profit? And that's because I'm in a financial pickle, right? Why are you in a financial pickle? And it always comes back to, I've spent no time whatsoever investing as a businessman or woman into understanding the numbers. And I say to people, hang on a minute, you're in the business of making profit. And I understand that not everybody wants to become a millionaire and that money's not the main trigger and driver in life. I get that. But nevertheless, you're running a business, you've got to make profit. And that profit that you are making is then going to determine the lifestyle that you and your family can have. So does it not make sense as a business owner to understand the numbers and how business works so you don't put yourself in that financial pickle in the first place? But the challenge for a lot of what I see is all them bad decisions like COVID. I know so many people that just took out the biggest bounce back loan they could that's now sat as a liability on the balance sheet. And what did they do with it? They blew it. They bought hot tubs, they bought jet skis, and they did all sorts of stuff they shouldn't have done with that money. And all them bad decisions that they've been making since setting up their business through neglecting the numbers, at some point is going to come back and it's going to bite you in the backside. So sometimes we've got to understand that the decisions that we've made in the past are going to catch up with us. What do we need to do when that debt catches up with us, Julie? What would you advise people that they need to start to do?
There's two answers to that, excuse me, depending on how bad that is and depending on what sort of profits they're making today. So we've got the past and we're now sat with the situation. Now, if they're making 20 grand a year and they owe HMRC 100, we need to talk about actually closing and starting again because they're not going to get out of that. So they excuse me. So and what I say with that, so I've got an insolvency practitioner I work with, and I always say to people, let's go on a free fact find. That doesn't mean that you're going to go down this route. Let's just find out all the information and give you the information so that you can make a decision. What's the right way to go? So that's someone, and then we start again. Things have changed with this. So I'm an ex-bank manager, as you know. So I left banking 25 years ago, and I'll be honest, there was some stigma around this. There isn't now. So even HMRC understands mental health now, and so sometimes we have to let people go and we start again. If it's a different situation, so you're now making 100 grand a year, you owe HMRC 30, 40, and we can work our way through this and we can come out the other side, then maybe that's a different decision that we make. But what we need to do is get to the status quo, as in what's the situation now, and make sure that this is not getting worse and that we're now building, moving forward, a profitable business. If you are losing money and it's getting worse month on month, then you are now in breach of your director responsibilities. You cannot continue to trade in a loss-making business where you can't see wood for the trees. We're not going to get out of this. Then you've got a responsibility. And when people say that I'm limited, I'm okay, I'm only in for £1, I've got my limited liability status. Not always the case, and certainly not if you're continuing to trade in a business when you shouldn't be. So on that one, to recap, free fact find, because everybody's different, we need to look at the situation and go down a route where you actually make a decision. And it involves family. It's a family decision, it's a big decision, but you can come out the other side. And I've seen many do it.
Yeah. So if we just touch on this, because I believe that there'll be many people watching or listening to this episode now that deep down know that they don't understand the numbers and they are in a bit of a financial pickle, and maybe they have been using their VAT money as an overdraft, or they get to January to pay the self-assessment and it's like, you owe this amount in tax, but I ain't got no money, right? If this is happening, let's just between us share some of the reasons why people aren't making money in the business. What are some of the main causes and root causes of why this is happening? Because some people might go, I get it, I'm not making money, Craig, but I don't know why. What are the things that are going wrong and what can they do to put them right?
Yeah, so we've talked already, haven't we, about material costs and rising costs and project delays and all that sort of thing. But on top of that, some of the decisions that they make. So they're growing when they're not ready. So let's say, as an example that I've seen a lot, so they're going to take on another two-man team. So a man and a lad, and a van. How much does that cost? Okay, we've then got to find the work to keep them busy. So it's about knowing and doing the scenario planning of, if I take on this extra cost, what needs to happen? That they're not doing that. And I think, hate to use this, but turnover is vanity, profit is sanity. They think that when they're growing, so I'm taking on two new guys, that off we go, and aren't I doing well? And I think they can think they're doing well. I think they've got good intentions. The big thing that they don't understand is the cash in the bank account. So if they've got cash in there, they think they've got money. And that cash, they've still got creditors to pay, they've still got to pay the suppliers, they've still got HMRC, they've still got the loans to pay. Cash does not mean that they're doing well. It might mean that they're sat in a load of invoices and not paid anybody for 2 months.
So again, from my experience of all this, I think some of the reasons why this is happening for me is, one, the pricing job's wrong, but two, it's an ego thing. And I were guilty of this as well, if I'm honest, Julie, because I'm not saying everybody does this, but I did it years ago. I'm thinking, right, here's what I want. I want 10 vans on road. I want like 15 people working for me. I want these big offices. I want my own car parking space. And I got this vision that if I could get to that point, I'd become a millionaire.
Yeah.
But what I did is, not understanding the numbers, what did I do? My marketing started to work, word of mouth referrals and everything started kicking in. And then all of a sudden, I've got too much work coming in for me. So my next logical step, not knowing any of this, were, well, I need to take more team on to cope with the demand and the work coming in. But the work that were coming in back in 90s, right, I weren't pricing it right. So none of it were profitable. So as I'm building my team and thinking, oh, look at me, Billy Big Balls, I've got like 10 people working for me now, which I had. And then I moved into the offices. Then I got my own car parking space. Then at that point, I think I were up to about 6 vans. Here's me thinking, oh, this is amazing. And I used to knock off early on a Friday and I'd take them to the pub, right? And we'd go and have a drink in pub as a bit of a team bonding, right? But all along, I wasn't making any money. So my overheads were going up. I'm taking more work on. I'm working more hours than I've ever worked before. I'm stressed out at max at home and I'm not making any money. And this for me is a typical cycle of what business owners go through by not understanding the numbers and not cash flowing things out properly. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I've seen it over and over again. I hate to say it, I do think most it's a man thing sometimes. I think it is an ego thing, it's a man thing, and it's not wanting to fail, to do the best around their family, and they just keep going. Now, I get that hard work and keep that going, but if you're doing it wrong, if you're pricing jobs wrong, if you're pricing jobs wrong last week, you're pricing jobs wrong this week, aren't you? So this problem just gets bigger and bigger, and we need to just stop sometimes and understand that there's no judgment, that you can stop and talk and ask for help.
Yeah. Yeah.
But one of the big things is then finding the time. So I was watching a YouTube clip this morning about health and working out and stuff, and finding the time and what you prioritize. And there's no difference to this, finding the time to manage your finances.
Yeah. Do you know what? You just talked about health, right, and finding time to do it. So we've sort of like touched on the negative impacts of the business, right? But what about the negative impact that it has on the business owner personally? How does all that unfold?
I think money makes money. That's not quite the question you've asked me, but money makes money for lots of reasons, and one of it is about confidence and that you're getting it right. And if you've got money, then you've got time to relax and actually take the time to make good, strong decisions. So the reverse of that is that if they're not doing well and money's a problem, then the decisions that they make become a little bit irrational sometimes, and it's panic, and they're not taking that time, and they're just doing back to fact packet mouths and doing what they think is best, or what their mate down the pub did. And some of these things that we'll talk about, I can't give you an answer overall properly, because what's right for that person's business isn't right for that person. So them listening to the mates down the pub doesn't work. We need to look at them and what we can do to help them.
So from a mental health point of view, right? Because again, coaching people, I know what they go through, not just for the business worry, but they can't sleep at night because they're falling into debt. They're not making money. They've got people taking piss on jobs. All these things are happening. What negative impacts are you seeing on people personally that where the businesses aren't quite working like they were hoping they'd be doing?
Yeah, so their behaviour, they can become more irrational, more angry. I've seen a lot of angry people, but then they can actually become unwell, can't they? They get ill. They get to a point because they won't give in, And so no, I understand, I get it. I've always got it, but it has to stop, doesn't it? Because if things carry on, if like I say, if you're losing money last week, you're losing money this week. So unless we stop and learn and do things differently, that animal's just going to grow, and ultimately it will make a milk or bust or both.
Do you know what? I'm thinking again. I'm using me as a reference for this because I can speak for myself. Back in '90s and early 2000s, I did both domestic work and I did commercial work. Right, two completely different markets, as you know. The domestic market's got it. The domestic market's got its pros and cons. Likewise, the commercial side has. But I just thought my natural progression from domestic was to move into commercial and get these big jobs. So I can turn around and say, we're working in Glasgow, we're working in Birmingham, we're working in London. I've got this big job on, right? And I moved into commercial side. But obviously moving into commercial side, you're then dancing with big boys and you're dancing to their payment terms. So all of a sudden, yeah, I've got these big jobs on. Ego-wise, it were amazing. But I weren't pricing the jobs right, so I was losing money. And because they were squeezing me on, paying me on 45 or 60 days, flipping out, the pressure that I was under back then, I couldn't sleep at night. I was snapping at my wife. I was even snapping at my kids, and it weren't their fault. My head were all over the show. I was making wrong decisions that compiled it all. So let's just talk about, as I'm sort of like moving into, this difference between domestic side and the commercial side, and what the commercial side can negatively do to your business in terms of payment terms. What advice have you got on that?
Yeah, so you a couple of things what you just said there. You said that you wasn't necessarily quoting right. I'm not sure you even, not you in general, I'm not even sure that you do quote when you're playing with big boys. Sometimes they tell you what they're going to pay you. Yeah, and you think you've won a contract for 100 grand, but actually that contract's going to lose you 20 grand a year. Doesn't mean that because the big numbers are there that you're making money at all. And I come back to me why. So whether they've gone down a commercial route or a domestic route, whatever they're doing, whether they're working within a local area, whether they're up and down the country, whatever they're doing, I'm back to why. So a client that came to see me yesterday was leaving me and going on his way to deliver some ladders to Scotland.
What?
Why? You just can't get your head around it, can you? And so he was telling me how much money were in that job, and I said, well, what's it going to cost you to get up there in the time, and the opportunity cost of what you've lost? But you could have worked on something else today. So what's that? Why have you done that? And he just said, well, something big might come out of it, and I've heard that one over and over again. But I'm back to the why. So if they can say to me on anything, well, I'm going down that route because of A, B, and C, and this is, and sometimes they're right. I'm not, but me by asking that question, and then I go, that sounds good. That even is worth doing because they've got confirmation there that we're feeling the same. That yeah, that's not a bad business decision. When I ask the why many times, it's like, well, because they rang and they booked job and we're doing it. I had somebody else this week who worked Easter Sunday for not a lot. I'm not working Easter Sunday, are you?
No.
No.
Yeah, so I think again, coming back to some mistakes people make is not understanding that when you're doing bigger jobs or you're with the commercial side, the cash flow situation can sometimes be horrendous. And in all honesty, Julie, I was that worried. There were times back then where, and I'm going back to like late 90s, where I'm owed 200, 300 grand. And it's gone like over 45 days. And here's me. What I had to do is I had to seriously, I had to remortgage my house to take some equity out of the house to bail myself out and cash flow my own business. But I weren't making any profit back then. It was
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. And that's the one thing we don't do. So we don't risk home. We do not remortgage home by any sense. But I think things have changed, like I said, in terms of calling it a day has changed. So we don't do that. But the other thing I wanted to come back to is the growth plans, because when I said to you taking on two-man team in a van, can your business support that? That's no difference to working with the big guys now who's going to take 90 days to pay you. Can your business support that? Can you cope with that? So that all needs planning and cash flowing and understanding why, and understanding let's say you go overdrawn to do that, then that's got another cost. Your margin's down because you're paying debit interest now on your overdraft facility. These things aren't making the money that you think they're making.
Yeah. Okay. So we've touched on the negative impact not understanding the numbers in your business is going to have. So what would you recommend that people go away numbers wise and start to look at, and what are the most important numbers in the business? Now, I know there's loads, but if you could just, pick some of the most popular and common and the ones that they must know, what are they?
Yeah, so first of all, we need to stand still and we need to get to the point where we understand where we are today. And that includes looking at gross profit, net profit, break even, looking at cash flow, looking at the margins. Very often businesses are growing in turnover, but the margin's dropping. Yeah, that might be all right, might not be all right. We need to look at the why and the wider business plan.
Yeah. Okay. So if we break that down then, so as you're rattling them off, I'm thinking, let's go back to the scenario at the beginning if I'm pricing a job, right? So for me, in my head, I'm thinking hourly rates. I need to know what my overheads are. I need to know what the break-even figure needs to be. I need to work out what my gross margin's going to be, what my net margin's going to be. I need to be looking at profit and loss at the end of the job. We also need to be factoring in the balance sheet if you're a limited company. So if we rewind a bit, let's just talk about hourly rates to start off with, which I know we've touched on. What do we need to, what are some of the things or some of the numbers that we need to pull together to work out as hourly rate correctly? What would they be?
All of it. Okay, but I'll break it down. So we need to understand. So you've got your cost of sales, which includes your materials and your labour for doing that job. So you need to fully understand the cost of that. When we take one from the other, so let's say let's make it easy, we've got £1,000 invoice and our materials and our labour, our sub-A is going to cost us £600. So on that job, we've got £400 gross profit. So £1,000 income, £600 worth of costs, we've got £400 gross profit. Now that £400, and going back to my qualifications in SEMA, that £400 gives you a contribution towards all your other costs. Okay, so all those other costs need paying from somewhere, and this is coming from your income. The only way I make money through Footprints Accountants is by invoicing somebody and doing a job. Okay, it's no different for you guys. So we're on £1,000 job, £600 worth of cost, £400 gross profit. That £400 is a contribution to all your other costs. So your rent, your vans, your insurance, your accountancy fees, your marketing, your admin, all your costs in your business. And that's got to contribute towards that. So we need to understand those costs and then make sure that that's included in when we're quoting that job. Beyond that, if you got all your costs covered, then we break even. Okay, you're still better off at McDonald's. So what we now need to do is understand, what do you want out of this as a business? So if you want 3, 4, 5 grand a month, wherever you want that to be, that needs to be built in to the pricing of your jobs. That's where the money's coming from. So you need to understand all of that, and the tax element. If you make how much will that cost you in tax? And again, we've got to build that in. So you need to understand every cost in the business. That's to work it through. Let's say we work out an hourly rate, a day rate, or however you pricing your work. But then doesn't mean that figure's right in 6 months' time. That's going to keep moving, especially now when things, cost of living crisis and everything keeps going up and up and up. Minimum wage going up. You might not be employing minimum wage staff, but everyone's pay goes up then. So if we work out an hourly rate, I'm doing it with someone this week. Great that he's come forward and he's starting a business afresh and actually wants to work out his hourly rate from starting. And we're doing this. It's got very little costs at the minute because it's new. And he knows that we've got to do it again in 3 months. Yeah, so we've got to keep working the way through that. And when you buy something, we buy a van, we do whatever, you commit to something, you take on a car, wherever you make a commitment, then that's got to be paid from somewhere. Yeah, you need to move house. We want 4 grand a month. We need to move house. We now want 5 grand a month. Well, where's that coming from? How do we work that through? And when we work all that figure through and we get an hourly rate or a day rate, is that even doable? Have you priced yourself out at market now because you've got posh officers and you're running around in big cars and you're doing whatever? Then we need to look at your costs and see whether your cost structure is correct. It is a moving feast, but it needs doing.
Yeah, and I think that's something else that we need to emphasize on. When you work out what your costs are now, or your hourly rates, or your overheads, obviously, as you already highlighted, everything's going up. So how many times a year would you recommend that people actually take stock and reevaluate this? Because if they've done it now and then they don't do it again till end of their next financial year, a year's passed, costs have gone up. Now they're not charging enough. So how often should they be checking?
I think they should be having at least quarterly management accounts. So I've got some clients that have monthly. They're the bigger jobs, bigger guys. I think as a minimum, we should be having quarterly management accounts. Now, in that meeting, because we'll always have a meeting, in that meeting, so we'll review those figures, your profit and loss, your debtors and creditors, your margins, your profit, let's tax plan. We're going to do all of that in that meeting. Now, if your margins are dropping, you know something's going wrong. So what is going wrong? So is the hourly rate now shifted? And when we look at, let's say we look at quarter one against quarter two, which we don't always, because sometimes we look at quarter one this year to quarter one last year, depending on how your seasonal is your business and what we need to do. But when we're looking what's happening in those two quarters, so what's changing, what's happening to your margins, what's going well, what's not going well, what do we need to do more of, what do we need to stop doing? But if we've got a reduction there in your margins, then something's going wrong, and is it time to review your hourly rate? It's
Yeah.
not going as planned, is it, if it's dropping?
Yeah. Okay, so lesson there is we've got to constantly be looking at the numbers in his business and reevaluating them. But as you've just taken us through that from your hourly rate, your overheads, break even, gross margin, we end up with a net margin, a net profit. Let's move his attention, Julie, over to tax.
Yeah.
Because I know I've done it myself, and I see just about every single trades business owner making the same mistake. I believe that 95% of people are overpaying on their taxes. So, first of all, if let's say we're a sole trader, right? What taxes does a sole trader need to pay? Just so people understand it. And then if you're a limited company, what are the taxes that they need to pay? And then what I'd like to do is explore what we can do to start. I know you're not a tax advisor. I get that. I know that. But I consider you to be a tax expert. You've got a lot more knowledge on tax than I have. So then I want to explore what can we start to do to reduce the tax bill? Is that okay? Can we move over to that?
Yeah, you confused me a bit. So what do you mean I'm not a tax advisor? Do you mean I'm not a financial advisor?
Sorry, financial advisor. Beg your pardon.
Yeah, so financial advisors, people that invest in the likes of pensions and, unit trusts and things. So I can recommend that I think you need a pension and that a pension will reduce your tax, but I'm not going to recommend which pension because I'm
Yeah.
not a financial. So that's the difference. But in terms of a sole trader paying on tax, okay. So a sole trader is going to pay tax and national insurance. Okay. If they're employing staff, then they'll pay national insurance for the staff. If they've got sub-As and they're on CIS, then they'll pay CIS tax. But and if they're VAT registered, then they'll be paying VAT. Probably at that side, if they're going to VAT register, they probably need to be going limited. But as a limited company, then we're going to pay. So the business pays because the limited company is a separate legal entity to the business owner. And this is something that they must understand. And it's hard because I own Footprints Accountancy. I think I'm paying corporation tax. I'm not paying corporation tax. Footprints Accountancy pays for corporation tax. So it's different. So the company will pay corporation tax. It will pay national insurance for its employees. It'll pay VAT. It'll pay P11D tax. It's, benefits that they give to the staff. It will pay tax in many ways. But the individual, so when I take money out of my business, so I get paid in two ways. So I go through PAYE for a small wage, and then I'm on dividends. And when I take money out of the business, I also pay personal tax. So it does feel, and I sometimes say to people, new companies, and just starting out, it probably takes a year for you to go through the cycle and understand how it all works. And the fact that they've got corporation tax to pay and then personal tax, it does feel like they're paying twice. That's the one I have issue with. Okay, so very often people think they're paying the VAT and the VAT's costing them 20 grand this quarter or whatever. The VAT's never your money. So with VAT, you are what we call an unpaid tax collector. So you charge your customers VAT, you collect that money in, and you send it to HMRC. The game here is that we make sure that we claim back as much as we can on the purchases you've got. And that's all about us having the receipts and making sure that we're claiming for everything. So therefore, you're not paying it all over. But the VAT's not your money.
Yeah. Okay. Just touching on that, right? There's many people, let's say newer businesses or early age businesses, if you like, that seem to have got this mental block that they can't go over the VAT threshold. If they hit the, what is it, 90, 92 grand now, is it VAT?
It's 90.
Right, so 90 grand VAT threshold. If I go over that VAT threshold, I'm never going to win work because now I've got to be charging 20% of that and I'm never going to win work. So, what would you say to people that have got that mindset? It's all right us saying, come on, flipping out, you can't grow your business until you go over that threshold. But if you're new to business and it's all a bit sort of like daunting, what would you say to them? Because they've got to go over it, or otherwise they're never gonna earn any money in their life.
Yeah, politically, this winds me up because I don't think that the tax system should stunt our growth, and it does. So people are trying to stay below. It depends on who your customer is. So if you're selling to domestic and so your customer is Joe Public, then they can't claim that VAT back. So therefore, if you're now charging VAT, you're 20% more expensive. If you are if you're selling to business, then the majority of those will be able to claim that VAT back. And they actually, because there's some snobbery around this as well, so they will believe that you are a bigger and better business if you're VAT registered. If you're going to go over the VAT threshold and your customer is Joe Public, so you're getting more expensive, then we need to know whether we can get to the other side. And what I mean by that is there's no point you doing 100. Okay, so the VAT threshold is at 90. If you can only achieve 100 grand in the year, then you're probably going to be worse off by being VAT registered. So we need to know that we can get from, let's say you're teaching at 85, we need to know we can get to 120, 130 and onwards. So I do have some of my smaller clients that I've had a long time that make a lifestyle decision to not VAT register. I've got one lady, she takes the month of March off. How mad's that? So back to the tax system stunting our growth. Others close a day a week. So people have made that decision. But if we're looking at businesses that want to grow, then we've got to get to the other side. And how do we do it? And again, it's not by it might work out. Everything needs to be planned. When I say planning, doesn't always work out. I'm not that anal. It doesn't work, but we need to have a guide. We need to have a plan. We need to have an aim for where we're working and how long it'll take us to get there.
Yeah. And talking about planning, Julie, there's a couple of my inner circle members recently that, well, I know you're working with them, but they're talking to me about, we're doing well now. Things are starting to move and pick up. And I'm considering doing things like moving house, right? We want a nicer house, a bigger house, right? So talk to us about the importance of actually planning and planning ahead and not doing what a lot of people do, which is, it's my year end. I've got an email from my accountant. I've got to go in and dump a load of stuff with them that I ain't got time to do, right? And then they're going to tell me how much tax to pay, and I'm going to stress out because I ain't got the money to pay it. So what's the difference between that scenario and actually sitting down and planning? In this example, they want to move house.
Yeah, I had a guy 2 or 3 weeks ago who, in conversation, he just said that his wife was pregnant again. And I said, so what do we need to do? And he laughed and he says, what do you mean, what do we need to do? And I said, well, you'll need more money. Is the house big enough? Because this were baby number 4. Is the house big enough? Well, no, not really. So are we looking at moving? Well, I can't afford to. Well, what would you need? So another grand a month, would that get us there? So yeah, that would. Okay, so we need to plan. We need to look at this business and we need to work out how we can get another grand a month. It's not that hard. It's really not that hard if you are on top of your numbers and planning. But we need to have no surprises. So it needs to be planned for and aimed and known where we're going and knowing how we're going to get there. So going back to tax bills, you shouldn't know the day before they need to be filed, which is 9 months after year end, what tax you owe. We should know at quarter 1, quarter 2, how it's looking. and what you're likely to pay. So we need, I feel like a broken record, but understanding the numbers and planning for growth, for family eventualities, for tax, we need to plan.
Yeah. So with this then, Julie, a lot of the times I'll hear people moaning and groaning and whining about their accountant. Oh, my
Yeah.
accountant should have done this for me. They sent me this through at last minute, and now I've been fined by HMRC. My accountant's crap. They don't change them. They just stick with that poor service. But in reality, whose responsibility is all this? Because what you're talking about now, I know for sure there'll be people listening to this saying, well, my accountant didn't do that for me, Julie. So whose responsibility is it, number one, to get top side of all this? And number two, when it comes to submitting, your VAT returns or your CIS returns or your end of year accounts, whose responsibility is it and who's signing these off?
Legally, the director. Absolutely, the director, and that's in law. It's director's responsibility to run their business, do the returns that they should do, and pay the tax that they should do. To not trade illegally, to trade, not keep losing money. All of this is the director's responsibility.
So if they're moaning and groaning now that their accountant's not doing what you're doing for your clients, what advice would you give to them? Because I look at this and I think, hang on a minute, I used to be that naive joiner, growing a business with a big ego and all this lot, and it got me nowhere. It just caused me years of grief and pain. So I understand now that without all the planning and without all the analysis moving forward, there's no way I could get to where I want to be. And what I've learned is your accountant is part of your team. And if your accountant is not working with you to help you understand your numbers, to help you increase your profits, to stop you overpaying on taxes, I believe if you've got an accountant that's not doing this, then they're not doing you justice. So what would you recommend people do, Julie, that might be sat there thinking, I don't get all this service. What do they need to do?
I think many accountants are not that entrepreneurial, and I can say that with quite a lot of knowledge. So I used to do some work for Inchwork QuickBooks, and I've trained over 10,000 accountants on QuickBooks. So just on QuickBooks, I've not put them through the accountancy qualifications, but I've met over 10,000 accountants, and most of them are not that entrepreneurial themselves. A lot of them are not making any money. They don't understand business. They understand the job of sat with a pile of receipts and doing step accounts, but from a business perspective, they're struggling. So I think that you should be with someone that is right for your business. Now, very often when you start out, maybe you are all right with somebody from, your friend's mate or wife who does a bit of bookkeeping or whatever. Excuse me. Maybe you're all right there for some, but if you want to grow, then you need to be with someone that understands your journey and can really, really help you. The other thing that I see over and over again is people that are not qualified accountants. Now, I find this quite alarming that anybody can call themselves an accountant. So I got one member of staff that had been with me a while, and I think she'd done 28 accountancy exams, but she'd got 2 more to do. Now, she couldn't use the term accountant because she'd got 2 more to do. And if she had used the term accountant, she'd get stripped of those 28 qualifications. So if you're going to have your qualified accountant, or you're going down the route of a qualified accountant, then you can only call yourself an accountant at the point where we're done. If you've got no qualifications, so if you, Craig, want to set yourself up as an accountant tomorrow, you can call yourself an accountant because you've not got a governing body policing you. Yeah, okay. So you need to ensure that you are with a qualified accountant. You then need to get up to date with your numbers, and you need regular figures. So whether that be quarterly or more often, you need to be able to understand the software yourself so that you can go on and actually pull reports and see how you're doing. You need that training and that knowledge. But you also need to be saying to your accountant that you want a different service. So I'd like this, this, and this from you. And very often I will say that they're generally quite honest people. So they may well say to you, actually, that's not us. I think you might have outgrown us now. You know, we've had many businesses come to us where their accountant has actually said, you've outgrown us, go and see Julie at Footprints. So it might be that they were right, might be that they can offer the services, but you've not asked for them. They won't have offered them. They're not marketeers. They're not salespeople. They're not that forthcoming. But you need to make sure they are qualified and you're getting the service that you need. And I'm sorry, but forget loyalty and it with my dad's accountant from 30 years ago and all that. If they're not delivering for you, then this is your livelihood, your family, your business. It affects everything. And we need to be, you're right, we need to be part of that team.
Yeah. Now, Julie, you know, there'll be certain people that are listening to this now saying, I'm doing well, Craig. We're making money. I've got all my ducks in a row. I've got pensions set up and I'm offsetting this and I've got all my bank accounts set up and everything that we teach. And if that is you, brilliant. Keep doing what you're doing because things are working. But there will be those people out there that are struggling, and there'll be more people struggling than there will be making money. I know that for a fact. So if you could give that person that might be just struggling a little bit one piece of advice to get themselves out of the predicament that they've put themselves in, out of it, what would that be?
Okay, coming back first of all on them that are doing well. So them that are doing well, I would argue that they can do better.
Yeah.
You know, so we can do more. We can still work on those numbers and do more. And if they're doing well, we certainly need to be tax planning. So there's an issue with them that are doing well. Them that aren't doing well, the one piece of advice has got to be we've got to get up to date. You've got to get up to date with the numbers. We've got to look at where we are, make assessments, make decisions, and then have that quite regular. Go back to your accountant and ask them to bring you up to date, to do the things that are needed. And how quick, not that we'll get to you in 6-7 months, you're in a queue. You need it. This is important for you and your business. And then take on that education. Say to your account, I don't understand this. Don't just come and sign them off. That's what, you know, ask questions. I don't understand this. I don't think that number's right. And educate yourself.
Yeah. Okay. This has been fascinating, Julie. I'm sure there'll be loads of people getting value from this. So what's the best way of people contacting you if they are considering moving accountants? And I'm saying that because I know what's going to happen from this podcast. You'll get an influx of people, but they're just there to pick your brains and steal your time. And we don't want that. We've got to be respectful of your time. You know, you've come on here now to help people. But if they are serious about moving accountants and they want to speak to you, what's the best way of them being able to get hold of you?
So you can book a free discovery call. We can send you the link. Maybe you can, Craig, but you can book into my diary and we can have a meeting and take it from there. What I would say is if you're doing well, great. You know, let's book in and let's see how we can improve. If you're not doing well, then I'm going to tell you that things have to change. So it's a cultural change, this. So if you were used to going to your accountant once a year and late on and things are changed, you know, never making any money and you're there at lastminute.com, that's not really anybody that I can help. So if you're wanting me to help you, then you're coming with a different mindset. I don't care where you've been before, but we're going to change now. We're going to do things differently. And we're going to work together on this. I can't do it on my own. I need you to be working with me. So someone that's coming that wants to make a change, wants to make a difference, will work with me. Then I'd love you to book in and we'll see where we can go with it.
Amazing. Well, Julie, what I'll do is I'll link up the link to your discovery call in your calendar around the show notes and the description of this episode. But, you know, for our Growth Club members in particular, you know, what we've said is over the course of the next month, we're going to be doing some joint coaching and training on all these numbers and getting our Growth Club members up to speed. And also, we're going to be doing some live Q&A sessions, aren't we? off the back of that.
It's going to be a great month for them. It really is. And going back to if they're serious and want to make a change, this is the month, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So if you're interested in finding out more about joining our Growth Club and coming on all our live training events, please consider clicking the link in the show notes and the description of this episode and go and check it out. So, Julie, thank you so much for joining me. I'm sure everybody who's listening to this or watching it has got massive value from it. And I look forward to catching up with you next week on our live training. Thank you, Julie.
You're very welcome. See you soon.